going to introduce our first speaker. So today we will have with us, we have the pleasure to have with us Mr. Arash Ghazanfari. That is the Chief Technology Officer from Dell Technologies, United Kingdom. Hi, Arash. How are you? How are you today?
Delighted to be with you today. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for being with us with the CIO Council, the Association of the CIOs and IT Directors from Romania. What did you prepare for us?
Well, today I was hoping to talk to you about Dell Technologies' overall strategy and approach when it comes to security transformation and how we can ensure that security can be an accelerator for innovation rather than it being a barrier to change.
All right, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for having me, Arash Ghazanfari, CTO for Dell Technologies, and supporting the overall go-to-market strategy for Dell Technologies across its entire ecosystem of partnerships within the United Kingdom. Hopefully, you can all see the slides okay, and you can hear me all right. Great. I just wanted to start the conversation by telling you a little bit about Dell Technologies. Of course, we are focused on delivering a profitable business, but at the heart of our company, we actually believe that technology can and should be as a force for the progression of humanity. And indeed, during the difficulties that we experienced within 2020 and ongoing challenges in 2021, we are actually very proud that with our broad ecosystem of partnerships and the resilient supply chain that we have at our disposal, we managed to help our customers meet the challenges and the requirements that they needed in order to accelerate their digital transformation. And many of our customers are also prioritizing holding on to liquidity and moving to inclusive as a service consumption models, which is something that we are indeed accommodating as far as the market demands are concerned. And we also have a strong commitment to research and development. And overall, this has allowed us to remain the #1 technology vendor in the industry. And this is not just our view, this is a view that is validated by many industry analysts like Gartner. And if you consider some of the mega trends that are affecting the technology industry, such as delivering an agile workforce, bringing compute and intelligence and machine learning capabilities to the edge as we are accelerating our digital transformation efforts at the edge, and exploring the intersection of AI, big data, and 5G, and the multi-cloud work that we are in today to explore trends like smart cities, the use of digital twin in the industry. All of these aspects we have relevance in across the board because of our broad range of capabilities. And indeed, one of the areas that we are focused on is how do we build security intrinsically into the fabric of our enterprise architecture so that security can actually span across all of these initiatives so that we can actually deliver our digital transformation outcomes safely and securely for the business. And the reality is that when we think about the security landscape and the security market, there are many vendors available out there. And what our customers are increasingly trying to basically do is to improve their security posture. And the reality is that if we look at security issues as point problems and start adding point solutions and not have a unified and integrated approach, it ends up having an adverse impact on our overall security outcomes, because we'll end up with too many security controls that may not necessarily work together, they may not learn from each other, creating a noisy environment that can create significant challenges for us going forward. And many of our customers are looking at rationalizing the number of security partners that they work with and moving towards more of a unified approach to implementing security controls. I highly encourage everyone to download the freely available data breach investigation report that is published by Verizon on an annual basis. There's some really interesting content in there, particularly around some of the common attack patterns that we see across each industry vertical. And some of the issues that we come across within Dell Technologies is actually confirmed in that report, which is, for example, ransomware and destructive cyber attacks are becoming more and more common. Certainly, ransomware has been one of the most observed threats in 2020 and 2021. And lateral movement continues to be a common characteristic for advanced persistent threats, where hopping from one system to another system is a common attack pattern that we see in the overall architecture. And unfortunately, many of our customers who come to us for help, who have discovered that they have been breached, indeed, they don't discover the bad actor in their environment after over 100 days have passed. And this is a common issue in the industry. And there are some misplaced beliefs around moving workloads to the cloud, or indeed repatriating workloads away from the cloud isn't going to improve your security posture if you have vulnerabilities inherently built into your application architecture. And if you were subjected to a destructive cyber attack, typically restoring from your traditional backup environment may not necessarily be the right thing to do, because you might have secondary payloads in those backup environments, and indeed continue to having challenges in that area. So we need to take a look at how we recover from these threats if we are subjected to a destructive attack. And in order to build an intelligence-driven defensive strategy, we need to have an understanding of the anatomy of the attack. As some of you might know, this is the cyber kill chain popularized by Lockheed Martin for the US Department of Defense. Some people might think it's slightly outdated. There are more sophisticated frameworks such as the MITRE ATT&CK framework available out there. But I think that this is a really simple and effective way for us to understand the journey that a bad actor takes from the initial recon phase all the way to establishing the command and control network and move towards the action and objectives phase. And there are certain things that we can do with nominal investment to improve our cybersecurity posture. So VMware, for example, published a white paper called The 5 Pillars of Cyber Hygiene, in which they try to discuss some of the ideas around improving the overall security posture within the infrastructure. For example, only give access to systems that you actually need to have access to, microsegment the environment and reduce the risk domain as much as possible, and make it very difficult for bad actors to laterally move across your organization and your technology investments. Encrypt your data, but encrypt your data where it makes sense to do so, because encrypting everything everywhere can actually have some operational challenges, particularly if you want to adhere to regulatory obligations such as GDPR. And wherever you've got human system interaction, you should consider implementing multi-factor authentication. And the last one says patching, but what we are really talking about is ruthlessly automating the lifecycle management of hardware and software. This is a major issue for many organizations who can't keep up with that change that is necessary to essentially keep the environment secure. And if you automate that piece, you take a majority of that headache away from your operational day-to-day issues. Now, from Dell Technologies' perspective, the defensive strategy should involve understanding the enemy and understanding the methods that they use, and being able to detect the threat activity as quickly as possible. And this can only be done if you've got your software-defined architecture and your software-defined security controls embedded intrinsically into the fabric of your enterprise environment. And that will then enable you to automatically and in a policy-driven fashion detect and disrupt the kill chain as quickly as possible, and then prove to the business that you have actually eliminated the threat. This is incredibly important, and this is a step that is somewhat missing from most environments that we tend to come in contact with, because there is not that end-to-end visibility. And of course, last but not least, it's about adopting and getting stronger so that your security controls are working together. They can share the indicators of compromise and the threat intelligence with each other, and you come out of this experience stronger than you were before. And that requires adaptability, and resiliency. So that resiliency is something that we can deliver with our secure by default architectures. Adaptability is something that you can achieve by having that end-to-end level visibility that, again, this is something that we can help you with. And unifying your security controls as much as possible by rationalizing the number of security controls and having a outcome-driven approach to acquiring security controls and investing in cybersecurity rather than tactically investing in cybersecurity. And this requires having that board level conversation with vendors such as Dell Technologies, or indeed with major players in this field such as Palo Alto Network and others, rather than looking at issues in a tactical from a tactical basis. Now, we can't really protect the environment, protect the future of our organization in the same way that we protected the past, because the way that we are deploying technology is changing, the way that we are consuming data is changing, and our application architectures are evolving. We are moving towards that distributed application and cloud native architecture. And therefore, we need to have a contextual understanding of what is actually happening with our application assets. We need to be fully in control of our application and data supply chain, and having that operating system level introspection and visibility and that granular contextual awareness of what is going on at our endpoints is extremely important. And our software-defined security controls need to be able to flex and flow with the application as the application horizontally scales, for example. If you're moving towards highly distributed microservices, it's really important that your security controls can flex and flow with the structure of your application, regardless of where these applications may reside. And of course, as your applications become more and more distributed and your data consumption becomes more and more distributed, it's essential that we understand what is actually happening at the network, and having a contextual awareness and detailed understanding of our network activities becomes really important. We need to be able to define a common language so that everybody up and down the organization can understand what good looks like, what is our attitude towards risk, and what is our desired security outcomes. We need to be able to declare these desired security outcomes and allow our software-defined, intrinsically secure, cloud-agnostic architecture to deploy our declared intentions automatically at scale on any platform, regardless of where our application and data resides. And we can only achieve this if we operationalize our approach to implementing and delivering security back to the enterprise. So as an example, imagine that your network administrators can define networking constructs in software. This can be done by several means. NSX, for example, from VMware is one option. Your security administrators can define security policies and controls. Again, that can be done in software. And then your cloud architects, your application blueprint designers, can inherit these security and networking policies and embed them into the overall application blueprint. And then when they're confident, they can then publish these applications on some form of consumption fabric. In this case, you're looking at something like a vRealize automation. Very commonly, we see technologies like ServiceNow being used, and they basically use things like vRealize automation as an execution arm. And these applications that are already secure will then be made available to your cloud consumers. This could be your customers, this could be your line of business consumers. They can then with confidence deploy these secure by default applications on any platform that IT approves. And the reality is that the security controls around these application blueprints will live and die with the application throughout its life cycle, regardless of whether these applications are deployed on traditional data center environments or if they're deployed on various cloud platforms. You are in control of your security policies, and you know that your application and your data is protected regardless of where it resides. This is a strategy that we have been implementing for many of our customers in collaboration with partners like VMware and other ecosystem players. If this is of interest to you, if you're not doing this today, you should really be applying this platform level thinking, and Dell Technologies is able to assist. And I talked about having that broad level visibility so that you can have a much more adaptable attitude towards risk. You can constantly be aware of your risks. You can make smart decisions around where your workloads should be located, and you're confident that you have that end-to-end visibility, so you know that you're not going to put your organization at too much risk if you were to move, for example, one application from one platform to another, or indeed deploy those workloads closer to where your talents are and closer to where your market requirements are. And as many of our customers moving towards more cloud-based technologies like Kubernetes and orchestration around containers and approaching that cloud-native application architecture, there are some benefits to that. One of those benefits is that you can create an architecture that is built for change rather than having an architecture that is built to last. The best thing that you can do for a malware author is to change nothing, because they can come in, they can build their command and control network, and they can take their time and they can carry out their destructive intentions at a moment of their choosing. Whereas you could do what many of our customers are doing by moving towards these cloud-native platforms, by being able to, for example, rotate the credentials within your platforms automatically, being able to keep up with the common vulnerabilities and exploit intelligence that is coming from, for example, the developer and the Kubernetes community, or indeed being able to destroy your production environment and recreate it again during production hours, one container at a time, in an automated and orchestrated fashion, taking full advantages of the availability that you see within the Kubernetes layer, and then allowing your environment to essentially refresh every few days. And by doing that, you're assuming that the bad actors are already in your environment, and you're essentially reducing the time to live of the bad actor within the organization. This is something that many investment banks are currently doing, and this is a practice that is being added to the portfolio of capabilities that organizations are employing from a cybersecurity perspective to enhance the overall security posture of the enterprise. Operational resilience is incredibly important. So in order to achieve operational resilience, particularly cyber resilience, you need to be able to build executive level awareness. That executive and board level buy-in will then allow you to approach your risk management from a more agile perspective. You can't wait 6 to 12 months to reevaluate your risk profile. You need to constantly evaluate your risk profile in this exponential age and uncertain future that we live in now. And you also need to be able to identify what are those critical assets that you need in order to function as a minimum viable enterprise should you be subjected to a destructive attack. And you need to be able to align your organizational capabilities, your technology and business processes so that you can move to a target operating model where you can deploy a consistent pathway to recovery regardless of what might happen to your organization. And that consistent pathway to recovery should be able to be tested and retested and proven on a regular basis. For many industries, this is becoming a regulatory issue. So it is not just good practice, this is a regulatory obligation that you need to develop. And to that end, of course, Dell Technologies has developed a cyber recovery capability. As part of a portfolio of security capabilities that we have, this essentially is going to be your last line of defense. It is not there to replace your disaster recovery or your backup capabilities. It is there to help you protect your most critical assets so that you can always have a pathway to recovery as a minimum viable enterprise should you be subjected to a destructive attack. Essentially, at its heart, it's a highly automated, isolated, immutable, and air-gapped data vault for your most critical applications and data assets. It can be deployed on premises or in various cloud environments. And we have established a practice whereby if you are recovering from a cyber attack, you have a data landing zone and a clean room so that you can inspect your data for any malicious secondary payloads that may have inadvertently found their way into the vault, and you can be safely introducing these workloads back into production. This is a solution that is being adopted by Sheltered Harbor. Sheltered Harbor is an organization that has been established as part of FS-ISAC in the United States to protect the financial integrity of the digital economy of the United States, where one bank can have a cyber vault inside another bank's environment so that the customer's transactions data is essentially protected. If, let's say, Bank of America is subjected to a destructive attack, Bank of America's customers can recover their data using, for example, another bank such as Merrill Lynch. This is just purely hypothetical example, but this is a technology that has been adopted by Sheltered Harbor and adopted by many banks within North America. And indeed, this is one of the fastest growing areas within Dell Technologies portfolio. And I have Bank of England mentioned on this slide as well, because they published a resilience white paper. And many of the principles that they have discussed in that white paper is indeed something that we have already implemented within our cyber recovery vault architecture. And I'd like to bring your attention to the executive order that was issued by the Biden administration earlier this year. For the first time in history, a government entity has given good and sound cybersecurity advice to the industry. And indeed, many of the issues that are highlighted here are things that we've been talking about for years and things that we've been delivering to our customers for years. And the number one is having that isolated air-gapped backup copy of your most critical assets, which is separate from your existing disaster recovery and backup capabilities. And this is not just about a product, this is about a partnership. We have many customers who come to us for help, and we can engage with them on a reactive basis to essentially clean the environment and bring them to an operational state. But we would very much prefer to proactively work with you and build that cyber recovery capability. And the reason that we would very much be able to do that for you is that should you be subjected to a destructive attack, you need to think about all of these steps that you see in this slide before you reach recovery. You need to be able to notify the right individuals. You need to have a response strategy. You need to be able to contain the issue and eradicate the threat and be able to prove to the business that you have eradicated the threat before you go to the recovery piece. And we have developed, essentially we have developed intellectual property around this to be able to accelerate this for you as much as possible. So if this is of interest, please do contact your local account teams within Dell Technologies. And I'll finish my talk by talking about Dell Technologies' overall approach to cloud. Our cloud strategy is all about helping our customers express their infrastructure software in a software-defined manner as consistently as possible, because complexity is the #1 enemy of good cybersecurity hygiene. Because if you express your infrastructure consistently across multiple platforms and multiple cloud environments, you can automate your workloads the same way, you can operate and secure and govern and containerize them the same way, and have the same level of visibility. And of course, having that consistent operating model then allows you to deliver value back to the business in a consistent fashion, regardless of where you are and where your workloads are deployed. And of course, all of this can then be supported by a declarative, unified, and intrinsic approach to security, which then allows you to enjoy a diversity of experience and deploy these workloads on any cloud platform of your choice, and always have an exit strategy, no matter what platform you buy into. With that, I'd like to hand the floor back to our host, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Arash. Lots of good thoughts. I like I hope we will have access to the presentation later on, but I had some questions. You had a very interesting slide at one point in your presentation regarding the application blueprint. And I was wondering, you know, assuring the security for a system in general, there are a lot of, you know, phases. There is a lot of tasks to be done. But you have a slide where network administrators, security administrators, and cloud architects, they have their own tasks in order to assure the system to be available, yes, to the cloud consumer. I'm wondering, based on your experience, which one of this position creates or generate more troubles, let me say, in terms of security, or if they're not they, maybe it's the application in itself. I hope I was understood.
I understand what you're saying, and the reason is there are lots of moving. The response I would say is that there are lots of moving parts, and it's hard to pinpoint where potentially you see the majority of the issues. But the point of this slide is more about breaking down those silos, so you don't have network administrators operating in isolation from security administrators. Security cannot afford to run in its own silo anymore because it touches everything. And as you move towards more DevOps and DevSecOps like operating models, where you start implementing, for example, cloud native applications, the innovation cycle of these applications is very fast. So you need to be able to almost automate everything as much as possible and create a trusted repository of resources so that you don't have manual activities happening within the organization, and bring that operational consistency and extend it everywhere as much as possible. To kind of try and answer that question, developers can potentially cause a lot of issues. If you move towards open source technologies like Kubernetes, you can get that Kubernetes from an off-the-shelf perspective and start building your own environments, and end up with snowflake architectures that inherently have security issues, because as an enterprise, you might not be set up for success. You might not be able to keep up with the innovation that is required, and then cause yourself some security challenges there. And if you cause too many friction for developers, then you lose control of how the application is developed and how the application is deployed, and potentially how the application evolves. So creating that frictionless environment for technology consumption is going to be critical to your success, to be able to keep control of your data and application supply chain. And you can only do that if you reduce the friction for developers. And within the Dell Technologies ecosystem, we have the VMware Tanzu portfolio that allows you to, for example, operationalize Kubernetes and build security intrinsically, for example, into your Kubernetes and cloud native architectures. And there is a lot more we can talk about, of course, but I don't think we have enough time.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, actually, the message is clear. So ultimately, starting from the DevOps to the cloud architect and network admin and security admin, they all should work together to build up finally the security. Why do you think Joe Biden and White House mentioned, you know, into the last directive to keep the backups offline?
Because and I did have a video, but I don't think we'll have time for that. The reality is that the common attack patterns, and I think our colleagues from Palo Alto Network will probably talk about this as well. The common attack patterns that we see is that if you're dealing with a nation state actor, or if you're dealing with a hacktivist, for example, who's hell-bent on destroying your business, they're not going to do it as soon as they get in. They come in, they establish their command and control network, they will probably compromise your endpoint security so that you don't detect them, and then they will go after your backups. We have had many instances where our customers' backups have been compromised, because if you're subjected to a ransomware attack, what they would want to do is to close off all the avenues for recovery as much as possible. So if your backups are constantly connected to your production network and are visible to the bad actor, they will definitely go after those assets if they can. This is one of the number one reason that offline backups are highly recommended. And of course, as digital transformation is accelerating and more developed economies are relying on technology for their economies to function, not having good cybersecurity hygiene can actually be life-threatening. So that's why they're talking about it.
Thank you very much, Arash Ghazanfari. I would have had a lot of other questions, but I will put to your colleagues, to Bogdan, because cyber recovery vault, there are plenty of questions regarding that, and exit strategy from the multi-cloud strategy. This is a topic for the CIOs. Arash, thank you very much, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, and enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you.